And I'm really very honored to have with us on this stage now Mr. Shurja Sharathi Roy, Mr. Proshun Roy, and Mr. Rubiranjan Shen. I'll come to Mr. Shurja Sharathi Roy. If you'd like to share a few words, like we know that Indian Revolution was mostly pivoted around Bengal, right? So we had a lot of Bengal revolutionaries, and that's a topic which we are discussing here as part of this panel. So, what is your take on this? Like, do you think that somehow Bengal had been the seedbed of revolution in light of Indian freedom movement, but somehow we have never been able to make that count? We are somewhere losing out the essence, what the kind of role we had played. What is your thoughts on that?
See, if I have to speak about Bengal's revolutionary activities and the Agni Yug that we talk of, let me rewind back by a few thousand years where Bharat has the Guru Shishya Parampara. And the Guru Shishya Parampara always had in all the monarchies a Kul Guru and a Kula Devata, which will be the driving forces of all activities of this monarchy. And this Kulguru used to be the Marg Darshak. Later on, through medieval times, and then, when we were in the 19th century, of course, we saw Swami Vivekananda coming in, and that is where things started turning. And in the last session, we also spoke of wrestling, and Swami Vivekananda himself was a great proponent of wrestling and playing football matches and focusing on the physical strength building of the younger men of that society. But what is important for here to understand is why did Swami Vivekananda inculcate the Shakti worship and started handling things more from a strength perspective? Because if you see, before he comes back in 1897, okay, he comes back in 1897, and in 14th of February he gives an epic speech at Chennai. And in that Chennai session, he calls out three things very important for all of us to understand. He tells or calls out to the youth of the nation that let there be no religion. I'm just reproducing word by word. Let there be no religion for the next 50 years for a mother whose hands are tied in the shackles of colonial rule. And the only religion and only religion for the next 50 years should be Poorna Swaraj. So it was Swami Vivekananda who first gave you the concept of Poorna Swaraj, which was later picked up by Subhash Bose, where he fought with Gandhiji and they fell off and all that stuff. The second thing, he clearly indicated, being a Yug Purush, he clearly indicated a span of 50 years that India needs to strive, the younger generation needs to sacrifice. And that is why the principles that he mentioned in those discussions, the first seedbed of that discussion was sacrifice and strength. From sacrifice, you build what we see today. And through sacrifice, through the ages, we have seen that how our dharma has survived. Second point that he clearly mentioned was woman empowerment. And third point that he mentioned was the Shakti, the building of strength. Subhash Bose, if you see right from his earliest times, you see the complete imprint of Swami Vivekananda in him. It is his, you can say, his Manasputra or spiritual son for that matter. And each and every theology of Subhash Bose, where he is focusing only and only on Shakti, Shakti, and Shakti, comes from Swami Vivekananda. And that is pretty eminent from his biography. If you read through his biography, that how meeting Swami Brahmanand or how going through the complete works of 9 volumes of Swami Vivekananda had transformed him. That clearly propagates that. And at the later years, whenever the British police used to come and raid the revolutionaries to arrest them, whether or not they will find the revolutionary in that room or not, but they will find a picture of Swami Vivekananda. So British police was always perplexed that who is this man? He doesn't even live, but his thoughts are living. No, it's like a title where it is the dialogue where Chawla, where Alamgir says, "Siva chala gaya, uska soch chhod gaya." It's a similar stuff, right? So that is the very essence which built all the revolutionaries of Agni Yuga. And even Rishi Aurobindo, when he speaks in Uttarpara, the famous speech, it also has a clear imprint of Swami Vivekananda in it.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really wonderful. Now that we are talking already about Agni Yuga, my next question is to Ravi Ranjan, sir. So, what do you think, sir? From like you have been a professor of history in Katwa College for such a long time, and being the HOD, you must have been through a lot of theses, a lot of studies on Bengal's Agni Yuga. So, what in your thoughts do you think that could have started that Agni Yuga?
Thank you. As Bamshurjoda very eloquently uh, enunciated about the role of Swami Vivekananda, who was instrumental in the sparking of the fire that lit the Agni Yuga. Along with Swami Vivekananda, the ideological influences that we see were, of course, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, especially his Anandamath from 1882 onwards. Along with that, we see also that the revolutionaries in the first phase were inspired by their readings of the some of the European revolutionaries, like the life of Mazzini, the Carbonaries in Italy, the exploits of some of the Irish revolutionaries, etc. So those were there. In fact, it is very pertinent to see that when the first raids in 1908 took place, the literature that was recovered mainly consisted of, one, the speeches of Swami Vivekananda, which have been described as well-worn copies of the speeches. Secondly, Bankim's Anandamath, and thirdly, biographies of Mazzini. So it was a kind of a very eclectic combination of all these. And also when we see in the training modules of the first group, the first group as we know is the Maniktala group. This formed a template for the later groups also. So in their training modules, they had, of course, arms training, physical training, then, of course, studies of the Gita and the Upanishads, which was compulsory for them. And along with that, they also had to read the literature, which I had mentioned earlier. So all these formed part of their curriculum, which, as we can see, which was ideologically very important for the beginning of this group. So the physical culture aspect which was mentioned, I won't be going into that since that has been described in great detail. That was ostensibly the reason for the starting of the Onushilan Shomiti, yes, the first group in 1902. So the front was physical culture. Of course, the deeper reason was something else, to build up a movement towards rouse the nationalist consciousness of the youth of Bengal. And in the oath that the first group had to take, the Maniktala group, they had to take an oath in Sanskrit and in Bengali. In the Sanskrit oath, they had to swear in the name of the Vedic gods and goddesses that their purpose was to establish a Dharma Rajya. But Barindra Kumar Ghosh, in his autobiography, of course, later he deviated from that position, but in his autobiography, when he discusses those years, he very clearly says that our aim at that time was the establishment of a Hindu Rajya. So we see that there is a very clear cultural and spiritual aspect which led to the first founding of these groups and the first decade. This remained to some extent in the later years, but in the later years after the import of some other ideologies, etc., from the 1920s onwards, this had got diluted to some extent. So again, when we see the discussion in the later periods, the discussion of this ideological impetus, which I was talking about, there is criticism and also a kind of apologistic mentality by even some of the admirers. Jawaharlal Nehru, in his discovery of India, says that the nationalism of 1905 was a reactionary nationalism, which was based on a narrow kind of interpretation of religion, etc. So there is a trend, and we also see some other historians like Sumit Sarkar in his Swadeshi movement in Bengal, dealing very sarcastically with the Sri Aurobindo, Barindra Kumar Ghosh, when he talks about these groups. So his tone is very sarcastic in nature. Even those who have lauded their uh, exploits and their contributions, historians like, say, Haridas Mukherjee, Uma Mukherjee, even they have tried to explain it away in a way that says that this is political strategy. This was a political strategy for them. So what I would like to say in concluding my answer to your question is that I don't consider it to be a political strategy, more so as a conviction. When we read their speeches, their writings, the Uttarpara speech which was mentioned, it doesn't feel like being a conscious political strategy. It feels like something which was inside them. So this conviction that the mother is the motherland and the divine mother are one and the same. So this was a conviction that came from within them. It was not just a political strategy which could be fed to the people in a cynical manner, etc. So we have to understand this. And there have also been attempts by some historians to say that since this kind of a cultural, religious view of nationalism supposedly alienated the Muslim community, so this led to a chain of reaction which later led to Muslim communalism and partition, etc. But when we actually see the events in its chronology, the first partition of Bengal could be annulled only by the pressure of this form of undiluted nationalism. Whereas from the 1920s onwards, when we had a kind of nationalism which tried to be more accommodating and which sometimes bent over backwards in its attempt to be more accommodating, and that is, of course, not only Gandhiji, but even other strands, even Netaji Subhash to some extent, I would say, starting from Chittaranjan Das's Bengal Pact. So when we had a kind of different kind of politics, which tried to be more accommodating, that kind of politics could not prevent the 1947 partition, and that led to the disaster.
Thank you, Ravi Ranjan sir. That's really wonderful and very insightful. Now that we are already talking about legendary Bengali revolutionaries, we got to know about Barin Ghosh, we heard about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. But do we wonder really about someone who belonged definitely to the Agni Yuga and did some massive contributions to India's movement from the land of Bengal, but we have forgotten him, unfortunately. Maybe he's deep down in our heart, he is there. He was very clinical in setting up a pact between Bengal and the Jat regiments. He was supporting Baghajatin. He was helping Baghajatin in getting German ships with full of artillery land onto Balasore. But unfortunately, a lot of pages have gone to history. Prasoon, I'll come to you. You have been doing massive research about Rash Bihari Basu, the person, the man, a visionary. So, what is your thoughts like when you were researching about him? We'll also come to your book, absolutely. But what do you think about the person? Did we lose an enigma like Rash Bihari Basu? What was so unique about him?
Okay, so I'm amid experts on this subject. So uh, let me give you my take.
Sure.
So when you say the word enigma, enigma is something which is surrounded in mystery. রাসবিহারী বসু এই নামটা আমাদের মন থেকে এমনভাবে মুছে গেছে যে কলকাতাতে একটা রাস্তা আছে যার নাম রাসবিহারী অ্যাভিনিউ, আমরা অনেকেই জানি না যেটা রাসবিহারী বসুর নামে নয়। সো রাসবিহারী বসু, আমি যখনই কথা বলি ওনার নামে, আমি একটাই কথা বলি যে হি প্লেড আ পিভটাল রোল ইন অ্যাচিভিং ইন্ডিয়া ইটস ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্স অ্যাট দ্য টাইম when it did receive it. কিভাবে, তার ডিফারেন্ট এক্সপ্লেনেশনস আছে। ওনার জীবনটা যদি আমরা একটা স্ট্রেচে দেখি, তাহলে ওনার কাজগুলো কিন্তু কানেক্টেডভাবে প্রত্যেকের জন্য উনি প্রতি মুহূর্তে ইন্ডিয়ার ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্সের জন্য কাজ করে গেছেন। I would say that he was one of the revolutionaries whom we can call an out of the box thinker. So if you look at his first activity as a revolutionary, because he was a man who was a firebrand revolutionary who gradually evolved into a global thinker and leader who could think about creating the Indian National Army, which led to the massive movement which ultimately materialized into our independence. So if you look at 1912, when Bengal partition was done initially and it was reverted back, why did the British suddenly try to shift the capital from Bengal to Delhi?
What was the pressure?
Bengal was the most ideal place to keep the British capital. It was a port, whereas Delhi was not. Why did they suddenly decide to do that? It was the reversal of that partition, which was like very, very hurtful for the British. And they decided to shift it. And this was the time, ওই সময়, ওই মোমেন্টে রাসবিহারী বসু ডিসাইড করলেন যে I will strike the Raj, I will strike whom? বড়লাটকে বোমা মারবো. That means the viceroy directly. The face of the British Empire is the viceroy over there in India. So he struck the viceroy directly at that particular moment in time. Very strategic thinking. But he was also like a double-edged sword. At that time, he was in Dehradun, and jedinke bombing ta hoy, the bomb exploded atop the elephant on which the viceroy was going, but it did not kill the viceroy. Next day, Rash Bihari Bose was back in Dehradun, and he was highly criticizing the whole activity that was done by the revolutions. And the day when Lord Hardinge went to Dehradun to recuperate from his injuries, people thought that Rash Bihari Bose was a pro-British man, and he was invited to the party of Lord Hardinge to attend him. Later, Lord Hardinge wrote in his biography that at that point, I didn't know that this is the same man who had bombed me one day back. So that was his way of out-of-the-box thinking. When World War I happened, he connected with all the British Indian soldiers across India. Why? Because to fight a imperial government which was controlling us for 200 years, so you need arms, you need weapons, you need soldiers to fight them. So he united all the regiments across from Lahore to Dhaka in a single chain to attack the British. At what point of time? When the World War was at its peak, and most of the British soldiers were outside India. So that is the most vulnerable point when one can strike. Very out of the box thinking. It was unfortunate because of a traitor that he had to, that mission failed, Gadar revolution failed. Like Sir was saying, historians have written them as Gadar conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. It was a revolution across the country, which was participated by every soldier of the Indian Army. For that particular mission, Singapore was free for one whole day because of the Gadar movement. And when his cover was blown up, কোথায় যাবেন উনি ডিসাইড করলেন, কোথায় যাওয়া সব থেকে ইজি, বিকজ হি ওয়াজ গোয়িং জার্মানি, আমাদের সব থেকে বড় সাপোর্টার ছিল। হি ডিডন্ট গো টু জার্মানি, he chose to go to Japan. Japan was a British ally at that time. But Rash Bihari Bose understood that Japan has many things in common with our Indian culture. than any other country. So one day, if I create the narrative over there, if I create the story of India's struggles in front of them, the entire Southeast Asia will support us. For with the knowledge of only 3 Japanese words, he landed in Japan, and he worked, he struggled throughout his next 30 years almost to create himself as a valuable person, so that the international general headquarters of Japan, the military base of Japan, respected his words also. There was a statement when somebody said that Buddha and Rash Bihari Bose has created deep sentiments in the Japanese from India.
That's amazing.
And that is the time. See, when you are capturing another country, when Singapore was taken down by the Japanese, the soldiers who were captured, they were mostly Indian soldiers. Because আমাদের ভারতীয় সৈন্যরাই ব্রিটিশ সেনাবাহিনীর একটা বড় অংশ ছিল। সেই সৈন্যদের জাপানিজরা ক্যাপচার করেছে। তো এবার সেই সমস্ত আর্মিকে, you are convincing a government to tell them that release these people, make them into an independent army, which is not your pet army, give them independent status, allow them to fight alongside you, so that the entire Southeast Asian prosperity comes and world peace comes down. So this is not a very small thing to do, being a outsider in a country like that. So his contributions were mammoth. আমরা অনেকেই এই সমস্ত কথা জানি না, এবং যখন রাসবিহারী বসু বুঝতে পারলেন যে his own health is breaking, he had tuberculosis after traveling all across Burma, India, Malay, তো India না, sorry, because he was never able to come back to India, because যতদিন ব্রিটিশরা ছিলেন, রাসবিহারী বসু passed away before India was independent, so he could never come back to his country, but he fought for his struggles throughout his life. So that was the level of patriotism he carried, and the INA got formed, and very selflessly he gave all the reins to Subhash Chandra Bose, because he wanted the mission to continue. So এতগুলো ফ্যাক্টর আছে যে মানুষটার, তাকে আমরা আমাদের স্বাধীনতা সংগ্রামীদের প্রথম শ্রেণীতে না রেখে তার সম্বন্ধে ভুলে গেছি। আমাদের ভারতবর্ষে বেঙ্গলে আমরা তাও উনার নামটা মনে রেখেছি। আউটসাইড বেঙ্গল, if I talk about Rash Bihari Bose, people hardly know his name. So this is something which I thought that if I can write something, at least I can make a few people aware of it. So that is the whole story of Rash Bihari
Thank
Bose
you.
in a very short way.
Thank you, Prasun. That's really very short, I must say, for a person like Rash Bihari Bose. We'll definitely come to you again back talking about your book. Back to you, Shurja sir. So, like when these Bengal revolutionaries were creating a lot of noise for British, we have people like Swami Ji, Swami Vivekananda, and other spiritual leaders like Rishi Aurobindo. So do you see that these spiritual leaders have left a reflection on Bengal revolution in light of Indian freedom movement?
Yes, definitely. I'll keep it very short. So, as Rabida rightly said, that it was coming from inside. So, if you look at the speeches of Swami Vivekananda, or the letters that he was writing that point of time, it speaks of a conscious and a super conscious awareness. Like Rabida rightly said, that Mother India, Bharat Ma, it was to be inculcated inside, and that conscious growth, both for men and women, what he emphasized, was something that he was constantly harping on. And in order to get to that level of consciousness, he gave the formula of 4 pillars: celibacy, sacrifice, strength, and integrity. And these were the 4 pillars that he was constantly mentioning. And if you look at not only Rishi Aurobindo, to Barin Ghosh, or even to Bagajetin, or even to the other people like Ullaskar Dotto, প্রত্যেকের মধ্যে কিন্তু ওই থিওলজিটা খুব সুন্দরভাবে ফ্লো করেছে ওই সময়, প্রত্যেকের মধ্যে, ইভেন উইদিন রাশ বিহারী বোস, রাইট? অ্যান্ড আমরা সবাই জানি, আমি জানি না আপনারা কতজন জানেন, বাট যদি আপনারা অরোভিলে যান পন্ডিচেরিতে, অরোভিলে গেলে স্বামীজি যে 14 দিন ধরে ঋষি অরবিন্দকে আলিপুর জেলে যে শিক্ষা দিয়েছিলেন দর্শন দিয়ে, সেটা কিন্তু অরোভিলে খুব সুন্দরভাবে ক্যাপচার করা আছে। আপনারা গেলে কিন্তু খুব ডিটেলে দেখতে পারবেন। বাট today we have forgotten those, and why Rishi Aurobindo became Rishi Aurobindo was because of Swami Vivekananda's teachings, was because of he had darshan of Krishna. So and those details are also captured by none other than Sivas also in his letters. So, yes, to summarize, there was a very deep impact which is even today not understood in a complete consciousness, I would say. And we really need to, I would say, study more on that, research more on that. And probably, I would say, the Ramakrishna Mission has a big role to play in that. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, that's really wonderful. We must clap for such deep research, deep insights, and sharing your thoughts with us. Coming to you, Robi sir, আপনি মানিকতলা গ্রুপের ব্যাপারে বললেন যে ওনাদের যে অ্যাটেম্পটটা ছিল, ইট আনফর্চুনেটলি এন্ডেড ইন আ ফেলিয়ার, এবং তার পরবর্তী দিনে আমরা জানি তাদেরকে সবাই আন্দামানে কালাপানিতে তাদেরকে ডিপোর্ট করে দেওয়া হয়। সো হোয়াট ইজ ইয়োর আইডিয়া অ্যাবাউট, লাইক হোয়াট লেড টু দ্য ফেলিয়ার অ্যান্ড হোয়াট ওয়াজ দি আউটকাম অফ দিস?
On 30th April 1908, when the bomb in Muzaffarpur did not find its target, and the very next day saw raids at around 8 locations in Kolkata, starting from, of course, the Maniktala Garden House to Sri Aurobindo's sister's house in Grey Street, where he was arrested. The entire group of revolutionaries were arrested. So this was the end, so to say, historically, of this first group. Barin himself, after he came back in 1920, he never again involved himself in any kind of political activities, whether violent or otherwise. Many of this first group did not revive their activities later. So it can be said that militarily it was a failure. Even before the Muzaffarpur bomb, they had attempted to assassinate Andrew Fraser, the governor of Bengal, twice. That also was a failure. In fact, those attempts, when we read those attempts now, they are seen as amateurish, and they can also be seen as clumsy if it were not for the dedication and the spirit of those young boys. However, on the other side, when we see that these were ordinary middle-class Bengali youth,
Yes,
who had come out to risk their lives, and they were taking on the British Empire at a time when it was said that the sun never sets on the British Empire. Barin himself, in his Bomar Kotha, very humorously, he had a great knack for writing, like his elder brothers. So very humorously, when he describes Abhinash Bhattacharya, when he had come to join the group, he says that one slim, thin kind of boy with his teeth sticking out, and Aggucha Poite Shambal, his only possessions was his poite, and with that he had come to overthrow the British Empire. So very humorously he kind of describes that. However, it was this group which, when the raids took place, the British found that they had amassed materials enough for 200 bombs. So how did they do it? So that also is something which we need to appreciate as a pioneering attempt. And secondly, the actual motive of their work was not so much militarily to overthrow the British at that point of time, but to rouse the national consciousness and to set a template for the future actions that was to follow. Barin himself says after his arrest, "My mission is over." He had famously declared that. And in his autobiographies also, he had clearly stated that the mission of the first group was to rouse the sleeping nation into the future acts of revolution. So were they successful in that? Let's see. Some of the newspaper reports of the time, just in the weeks after the arrest. The Indian World newspaper says, "Say what you may, all this is a glorious vindication of Bengali character." The Observer, which was published from Lahore, said, "The Bengali has been avenged upon Macaulay." Very interestingly, it says Macaulay. Why Macaulay? Because again, when you relate to it, Macaulay, in one of his essays on Warren Hastings, Macaulay gives a very bad description of the Bengali character. He says, "The physical organization of the Bengali is feeble even to effeminacy. He lives in a constant vapor bath. Courage, independence, veracity are qualities to which his constitution and his situation are equally unfavorable." And he says that the only quality which the Bengali possesses is deceit. So, the Observer says that the Bengali has been avenged upon Macaulay. So, in popular consciousness, we see that this first attempt gave rise to so many ballads, poems, writings. We know the songs about Khudiram, Akbar Biday De Ma. So there were so many of these which roused the nation. So the legacy of this group lies in serving as a template for the future revolutionary groups who modeled many of their aspects, including the training modules which I was talking about, on this first group with a fusion of the physical and the spiritual training. So we see that in the cultural heritage of Bengal overall, which we are discussing today, this group lives on in the popular consciousness as something which is equivalent to the most daring exploits of many other nations, including the assassination of Narendranath Goswami within the jail premises. So all these have become the stuff of legends. And of course, they have set a template which we can see right up to Netaji and the INA. And after 1908, pertinently, there was never a lull. Rash Bihari picked up from there. And after that, we have Bagha Jatin and so many others following. So there was never a lull, even after each and every member of this group was rounded up and sent to the Andamans, etc.
Thank you. I was literally getting lost into as a visual world, belonging to a family of freedom fighters. My great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, and his both his sons, they lost their lives to British bullets right on the ground. So I could still, I mean, in my family, আমাদের বাড়িতে আমার দিদা ৯২ বছর বয়স, উনি এখনো বেঁচে আছেন এবং উনি নিজে স্বাধীনতা সংগ্রামী ছিলেন বিয়ের আগে। এবং she marched on 14th August midnight যখন অফিশিয়ালি ভারত স্বাধীন হলো, সেই মার্চ পাস্টে উনি ছিলেন এবং এখনো আমি ওনার কাছে যখন কথা শুনি উনি হারিয়ে যান, and I get literally into tears when I listen to him. I mean, আপনার কথা শুনে সত্যি মানে I could reverberate the I'll say the রক্ত গরম করা যে সময়টা আমরা মানে পেরিয়ে এসেছি. It's really very difficult to overcome that. It's a very hard-earned freedom which we have got. So we should all
have to remember that concept.
We have to exactly share this to our next generation. They should know what we have lost and how we have gained this freedom. This is so special for us, right? প্রসূন, সময় আর বেশি নেই, তোমার কাছে ফিরে আসছি। তোমার বইটা আমি পড়েছি, ঠিক আছে? তোমার বইটা না একটা খুব অদ্ভুত জিনিস লেগেছে, ভেরি ডিফারেন্ট স্টাইল, ন্যারেটিভ স্টাইল। নন ফিকশন বইতে আমরা জেনারেলি ডায়লগস দেখি না, ইদার ইটস আ প্লে অর ইটস আ স্টোরি, কিন্তু তোমার বইটা কিন্তু নন ফিকশন। Primarily it's a non-fiction, but what actually motivated you, inspired you to write a non-fiction book in a narrative style with dialogues?
Okay, so I'll be very short on this. And uh, when I started to write this book, when I finished the manuscript, boitar title chilo The Other Bose. But we changed it because I didn't want to connect the two Boses and create a conflict. Both had a very good relationship between the two, and each of them had a very individual journey. So that is why we changed the title to A Samurai Dream of Azad Hind, because it connects India
Japan
and
as
Japan
well.
together. Now, coming to the narrative style, two things I would say. One is, before I ventured into writing, non-fiction books, translations, and everything, my first two books were for children, and they are rapid readers at the DPS schools of Gujarat also as of now. But
That's wonderful.
when I wanted to do a non-fiction book on a forgotten revolutionary, I wanted the younger generations to know about him, because he is an ideal example of becoming from a firebrand revolutionary to a global leader. So that was the journey of a man, and এই কথাটা যদি আমায় ছোটদের কাছে পৌঁছতে হয়, I have to make the book interesting also, to make them read it rather. And this is not the first time. If you read Shadok Biplobi Jotindranath by Dr. Prithindranath, উনার বইতেও যখন উনি এটা বাংলায় লিখেছিলেন, it became the first thesis of his on Bahajotin. সেখানেও কিন্তু there were dialogues that he had put. So it's not a unique way, I would say, but it is one particular way which makes reading easier for people to make the subject more interesting that way. So that was my intention, and I'm thankful that many people have appreciated the book and liked it.
Yes, it's very interactive. That's what I also felt as a reader. I was connecting to the characters they were talking.
Absolutely. And just to add to what Robi sir said, the connection of the revolutionaries was never individual. মানে কেউ ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল ছিল না, কিন্তু যে ন্যারেটিভটা বলা হয় যে সবগুলো স্পোরাডিক ইভেন্টস, ইট ওয়াজ নট. Rash Bihari Bose gave something to Shochindranath Sannal. Shochindranath Sannal showed it to Bhagat Singh, and Bhagat Singh had it in his possession, and he used to say that this is the Gadhar Anguthi which he had with him. So one of my friends has written on Bhagat Singh, the jail diary of Bhagat Singh, so in which you get to know about this long connection. So one man's deed was not individual, it was a chain reaction that led to everything.
The legacy was always
Yes. So we need to write more about these people to make people more aware of it.
Thank you, Prasoon. That really, I think, audience also is appreciating it. So here we come to the end of our panel 4, which our topic was Heritage of Firebrand Revolutionaries, Bengal, the Seedbed of Revolution. I'm sure we have learned and we have got to know a lot of things from the three eminent speakers we have here on dais.
অগ্নিযুগের যে কথাগুলি বীর সন্তানদের কথাগুলি বললেন, তো it would be incomplete without mentioning about the first revolution which Bengal had, and it was against the East India Company, that is the Chuhar Revolution. That started in the Manbhum region, and we had the Rani Shiromani Singh, who sacrificed her entire life. She was in Hijli jail, that is in my hometown Kharagpur. She was whole life she was imprisoned, that without mentioning her contributions, that Ognijuk would it would be incomplete. And what I think, there is a spiritual aspect to the freedom struggle, because Khudiram and Bagajuddin, everybody was doing their duty to mother, and Khudiram's last wish was never fulfilled. His wish was to have the Charanamrit of Ma Siddheshwari before getting to the gallows. And this aspect and this spiritual aspect we should always highlight. Thank you.
As I said, very rightly pointed out, it is very difficult in one single session to capture each and every revolutionary per se. But that is why I mentioned the Guru Shishya Parampara and the Kula Devata and Ishta Devata. So if you really see from the annals of history, Bappa Rawal was blessed by Gorakhnath, and Bappa Rawal is famous for pushing back the Arab invasion right up to Rawalpindi and beyond, right? It is the same with Shivaji, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, or Maharana Pratap, who considered himself, or the Sisodias per se, who considers themselves as the Diwan of Eklingji, or the imperial Gangas in Orissa, or the Gajapati Maharajas who considers themselves as servants of Sri Jagannath. So spirituality is deeply embedded in the Bharatiya Sanskriti, Sanatan Sabhyata, and it has continued. What you have seen, or what we have seen in the revolutionary period, is just an extension of that cultural thread, as Dr. Tinku Acharya also rightly captured. Encryption is what we do today, was taught many things, and these are just a few pointers. There are so many examples around us today that we are seeing today. We are coming up and we are reinventing them, but all of them existed much, much earlier to that. So it is important for all of us to understand that whatever we do today, whatever we experience, and as Prasun has rightly said, that it is a chain reaction, it's a legacy that we are continuing to build on, and it will continue because these are seeds which are built into our consciousness right from our birth through our various rituals, practices, and cultural legacies that we hold on to.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the next question, please, from sir.
Why Narendranath Bhattacharya changed his name and became Manavendranath Roy? Roy. What was necessary?
Well, in his later life, after this period, he went to Europe, and there, of course, as we know, he became a communist, and he was influenced by that ideology and all that. So, in his later phases, he changed his name perhaps to overcome the legacy of the earlier. What is the exact reason? I don't know. So, in his later phase, he was known by that name, Ananda.
What was that legacy? What he exactly tried to hide?
That we can speculate.
We'll
I don't
probably
think he
request
has-
everyone to relate the question to the panel.
I don't think he has very explicitly stated.
So I would like to add to you, sir, like after Bhajajotin's demise, M.N. Roy's movement had been across the world. He has been doing several things. He came back much later to India, settled in Dehradun, lived the rest of his life over there. And, he was he was called the lone tiger roaming in America, something like that. That was the tag given to him. But yes, his journey was also full of mysteries and enigma. Several times changing his name, landing in the US as a French gentleman over there. So maybe at a later point of life, we can just speculate why he had changed his name, because it's he only who could have told us best.
Maybe we can
So-
take that as a thread for our
Yes,
next
yes,
conference.
absolutely. So he had never explicitly said that, but he had again later on in his life when he took up communism, and then he became disillusioned about communism also later in his last life. So several points came into play, maybe to cut back the chains of his association, because in Prithindranath's research, he had written M.N. Roy's statement that if there was only one man whom I ever obeyed in my life, that is Bhajajotin. So after Bhajajotin was martyred, maybe something went on. So that's all we can speculate.